everyone. Thanks for joining us on another Kid-Free Weekend. I'm Jeff.
I'm Jennifer.
And this special report, it seems like we've been away forever, but this special report is coming to us because of a passion of mine, babe. Mm-hmm. We have a couple guests with us on the line today through the magic of Skype, which is... I'm not going to talk about Skype right now, but it's working. We got two guys with us. I want them to say hello. We have Darrell Hayhurst and Dean Gilbert. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Now, Darrell.
Yes.
I want to have people be able to identify with your voice. So you're Darrell, and Dean is.
Yes, I'm Darrell Hayhurst, one of the designers on Torg Eternity.
And I am Dean Gilbert, also one of the designers on Torg Eternity.
Well, that won't be confusing.
well, Darrell is the line manager too. So
what does that mean?
I'm not a title guy.
Okay.
Right. So and this is just it. Like, I'm not a title guy. Like, really, how this works is like Shane Hensley and Dean and I like trade a bunch of stuff and we write things and it all comes together. But, you know, the rest of the world seems very concerned about whose title is what, like who's lead designer and who's line manager. And I don't know. We just do stuff and a cool game comes out.
Nice. So let's talk about that. How did explain all of what you're doing?
Yeah, we should talk about what Torg Eternity is, first and foremost.
Yes.
I feel like maybe we should go back to my high school days. What an exciting time that was. Okay, so I used to spend a lot of my free time, let's say the vast majority of my free time when I was a teenager, high school, and then college days as well, playing role-playing games. Now, babe, what does a role-playing game mean to you?
Well,
because I don't know whoever's listening here. We could have Torg fans listening. We could have just, our other listeners listening, of course. So what's a role-playing game?
I believe it is any type of game in which you play a role.
That is true.
Thanks.
Is it safe to say, guys, that the most, I guess, name recognition, sort of most famous role-playing game would be Dungeons & Dragons?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As highlighted recently on Stranger Things. Looking forward to season 2 of that.
It brought it back.
Oh, God, the memories. What did you guys feel when you saw those kids playing in the basement?
You're doing it wrong.
Are you saying it wasn't 100% accurate?
No, actually it was really, it was, so everyone's experience is different, of course. And hilariously, like, I've got a friend that played D&D in the basement, like, with those miniatures, and it was like 100%, like, dead on his experience. Huh. My early role playing experiences were a little bit different because I wasn't a D&D kid. I started with Champions instead.
Champions, okay.
Yeah. So of course I got that skewed my perception on role playing games consistently since day one.
Well, yeah, I played a lot over the years, and D&D was typically not at the forefront of that. Actually, I'm kind of surprised, but I just certainly know Dungeons & Dragons. I might have spent more time on D&D playing the old video game versions, the gold box games they were known as, Pool of Radiance. Oh, yeah. I mean, if we really want to get nerdy here.
Now, can a video game be considered an RPG?
I mean, I think it's...
Absolutely.
Because I thought you had to do like live action type.
Well...
It has to be not video game. Because then I am like a total RPG nerd if that's the case. If video games are included, I'm all in.
We have talked on this podcast and also on Pod of Thrones, our Game of Thrones show, quite a bit about Skyrim, which Jennifer has gotten sucked into a lot.
There's a spectrum of role-playing games that I would say, and computer ones are definitely on one end, and probably in the middle is your tabletop D&D type games. And on the far end, it's you almost get rid of the games altogether, and
Jeff has done that.
Yep, live action.
Jeff has done that.
I'm a big fan of, all of those things together are part of what we're talking about. And I don't like partitioning them off into like little chunks and sections. It's like, oh no, like we need to make this hobby bigger, not cut it down into smaller pieces. So.
Anything I think that you can pretend in a quest type game should be considered RPG, I think.
Well, like in a video game, you mean?
No, any
kind of game. Mm-hmm. Sure. I have board games that I would consider to be role-playing games or very close to it. My favorite, I guess, I mean, I don't even know anymore. I've gotten so many cool games, but one of my all-time favorite board games was a game called Talisman, of which I have many expansions and pieces
have played
for that.
Many times.
Oh, so much stuff. I saw them play that on Big Bang Theory once, and I was almost offended because I'm a super nerd. I'm like, they're playing it wrong. The board is right there. I recognize all the pieces they have out, but they're not doing
the things they're supposed to do.
They're just making stuff up. No,
there are some sacrifices that have to be made for the medium they're showing.
Yeah, I know. But sometimes it's as simple as like, I played a board game with someone once who had never played a role-playing game before, but he was giving the board game thing a shot, and his Talisman character was an assassin, like thiefy type guy, and he kind of got into it. Like he wasn't going to go be a valiant, I'm going to face the dragon head on. He was running around stabbing other players in the back because that's what an assassin would do. So even though there's no RPG sort of backbone to a game like Talisman, which is really just get to the center of the board and win,
you can get into the character.
Yeah, your character can still wind up defining the way you play a game.
Let's talk about Torg.
And then we should talk about Torg.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the definition of a role-playing game. What you just said there. Mm-hmm. Like when your character's motivation overrides any other concerns of victory or defeat, that's a role-playing game at that point.
Ah, I like that.
Of which Torg counts.
Yeah,
okay.
so back in the 90s, there was this great company called West End Games. And I own more of their products than anything else. They made a Star Wars role-playing game that I was a big fan of. And then they also came out with a game called Torg, which a friend of mine got into very heavy, and I wound up buying a lot of the products later. But Torg is one of the most interesting ideas for a role-playing game that I've ever seen. It's a multi-genre game involving different parallel dimensions, very similar to Earth, but they've all landed on Earth as an invasion force.
I've got an elevator pitch for you.
Oh, here we go.
So because it's kind of hard to condense Torg into a short thing.
I was just trying, and it's a struggle.
So here's what I came up with. Imagine a role-playing game where you have a party, so a group of characters that consists of John McClane, Harry Potter, Van Helsing, Captain America, Lara Croft, and Jackie Chan. And one week they go to New York to race against Belloc to find artifacts in the Land of the Lost. The next week they fight ninjas in Cairo, which is also the world of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the following week they go to France to fight against the Spanish Inquisition in the Matrix. And all three of those happen in the same world.
Right.
What do you think of that, babe?
Sounds kind of crazy.
It is crazy, but here's how Torg is grounded, right? Like the conceit is the base level of Torg is the real world. Like when we look out our window and see, there are familiar things to grab onto. Mm-hmm. And then layered on top of that, where these other dimensions have landed and taken over and transformed things and turned things into something else. Those are all stories we know. Like we've seen pulps and read 1930s fiction, so we kind of know what that looks like and what it would be like if that were layered over Africa. Uh-huh. We've seen King Kong and dinosaur movies, so we kind of get what it would be like if that was layered on top of New York. And
it's like Jumanji.
Yeah, exactly.
It is, actually.
Right.
You guys are all better at describing this than me. I'm glad you're all here.
Well, it is kind of our job, right? And so, and then the conceit of the game is when you go from one location to another, the type of story that you're in changes to match that dimension that you're in. So you're like, okay, we're going to India, everybody, and India, unfortunately, has been taken over by Call of Cthulhu, Victorian horror. And everyone's like, oh, man, do we have to go to India? Why don't we go where the superheroes are instead? Because,
That sounds fun.
It is fun, babe.
It sounds fun. I'll do it.
All right. Well, yeah, so I haven't done a tabletop role-playing game in a depressingly long time when I stop and think about it. But Torg was the one that I always wanted to try to get back to. And miraculously, just as I feel like I've been getting to a point in my life where that might actually be possible, Torg kind of went away for a while. West End Games, unfortunately, went away. I don't know if it was the late 90s or early 2000s, but they no longer exist. And so Torg ceased to be in production as well. Mm-hmm. So now, at long last, we have a revival. How did that come to be, guys?
I think I might know a little bit more about this than
I was say, you take that one, Dean.
Yeah. So basically, because of bankruptcy issues and stuff like that, and lawsuits, I think in the mid to late 90s, West End Games basically folded, and then Torg, or West End Games itself, and Torg along with it, got sold like 2 or 3 times, and there was some attempts to bring it back. One that Kansas Jim Ogle did in the mid-2000s was sort of like a version 1.5.
And it's Jim Ogle, by the way.
Jim Ogle, I'm sorry, I butcher names all the time. And so they came up with a revised and expanded edition to try to sell the backlogs of the books that they did have. But then it kind of faded away again. And then about 7 years ago, Ulisses Spiele bought the Torg property. And then about 2.5 years ago, after bugging the guys at Ulisses Spiele every 6 months, I joined fortuitously the design team right at the start of development. And that started about early 2015. Right. And then we've been basically working on it for 2.5 years.
And the backstory with Spiele purchasing it is the owner, Marcus Plotz. He loves Torg. He is, I think, probably like the biggest Torg fan in the world.
Wow.
And grabbed it. It's like, I like the spatulas so much, I bought the company, right? That's why they acquired Torg, because he loves Torg.
I'm sorry. I just have to stop you for 1 second. You know, babe, that you are in the company of amazingly good nerds when you get a Weird Al UHF reference in the middle of a conversation. I just wanted to say that. All right, sorry, go on.
I think Marcus has been playing almost constantly since it came out, doesn't he?
He has. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, their group. Yeah, some of the elements from their games have definitely found their way into Torg Eternity, like the newer version of it. But so it was kind of, when he purchased it, it was with the idea of this relaunch, and then it was crafting it. The time between then and now was taking the time to get it right, to get the right people involved, and the big one there was Shane Hensley. When he pulled them in, and actually they pulled a lot of people in early on, and there was a struggle to find that vision of what Torg Eternity would be, like how it would be different from the original, what would be the same, and to make it happen at all, they kind of had to condense that vision down, and Shane kind of became the flag bearer for that. And Shane brought in Dean, and then later I got to join the party.
What are both of your backgrounds in terms of role-playing game design?
You want to start?
No, you go first, Dean.
Okay. All right. So I started with Dungeons & Dragons, so apparently I am the exception, where I was into D&D early on in the mid-'80s, and that was my primary game till about 93, I guess, and that's when we started, I guess, getting a little tired of Dungeons & Dragons, so I kind of was looking for another game to play. And I remembered, hey, there's this game that came out a few years ago that looked really cool, but I didn't get into it. And so I got into it and loved it. And we played it really intensely at the time. Then I had to go to graduate school, so my role-playing really dropped off for a while. But that period of time, I just loved the stories that could generate. And it also scratched my itch, because I have a little problem with having I can't do campaigns for long times. I'll get sort of tired of it after a while. And Torg just allows you to jump from types of games to types of games, and it's all the same game. And so I was able to get the variety, yet my friends, my players were able to still play the same characters that they'd played for a long time. And so that was a big appeal to me too. So yeah, I just loved the setting. That just hit it out of the park for me.
In our groups, Dean, we call that shiny syndrome. Yes. Where you're like playing one game and then like you see on the shelf the next game and you're like, ooh, shiny, and you go run over to that one and drop your current game. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately my players are not like that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, when I heard that Ulisses Spiele bought the product, the Torg, that was when I started going, maybe I could get into freelancing. And so I sort of started doing things to try to put myself into a position where I could maybe possibly work on an adventure or part of an adventure or something like that. And then I just, like I said, I was bugging one of the guys from Ulisses Spiele every 6 months. And finally they said, we're starting to work. I'll get you in touch with the guy who's in charge, which is Shane Hensley. And I was shocked to find out that I was like literally, I think it was a week after the group formed. And then they just brought me in and I had to do a little, test to prove that I could, do stuff. But yeah, they brought me in and I'm just still pinching myself that I am involved in something like this way deeper than I ever thought that I would be.
That's great. You get to be involved with something you love.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Aw.
And it was all driven by a love of this particular game.
Right.
It wasn't that.
It's amazing.
It wasn't that you've been
just loving games,
working with Wizards of the Coast on designing D&D modules and things for a long time. It was Torg's coming back. That's really exciting. And you just really wanted to get involved.
Good for you.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, tell me who, did you say Ulisses Spiele?
Ulisses Spiele. It's German.
They're from Germany.
That's the parent company. Ulysses is the game company. Spiel means play, like it's games, essentially. So it's like Ulysses Games. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're technically Ulysses North America. We're a spin-off group. But they're the primary owners, and because Marcus loves Torg, like we always feel like, they're involved for sure.
Wow.
Actually, to be honest though, I am surprised how much rope he gave us though.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he gave us a lot of latitude on how to do things. And I mean, obviously he comes in and there's a couple of things that he definitely wanted, and so we kept that. But
That's
but no,
great.
he's been great to work with.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, he's a creative guy and he understands creative process, and that needs some room. So my background, real quick, I'll just spin through it. Longtime player, started with Champions GURPS. In 2000, I published a game of my own, a space combat game called Hard Vacuum. And then about 2 years ago, I got laid off from my real jobs. And the time was right to try and do some freelancing. It took off. I got a lot of work. People were happy with it. That put me in the same circles as Shane Hensley. We played a couple games together. We hit it off. I started doing some work for him, and he said one day, "Hey, have you ever played Torg?" And I said, "Yes, I do know Torg." And did some more test writing, and then the rest is history. We spent like the next year, working together on the new rule set.
So I want to let's talk about that a little bit for the Torg fans that are joining us that, for whatever crazy reason, haven't yet explored what Torg Eternity has to offer. So if I were to just think about sort of the basics of what Torg was, we had 7 or 8 different realities with different genres that you could play in on any given day, ranging from high fantasy, you've got cybernetics and Matrix kind of stuff. You've got plain old regular Earth as we know it. And then a lot of systems, a lot of books. Sometimes I found some of them, I think I'm not the only one, gadgets and magic could get a little complicated. Yeah, sometimes. I don't want to diss it because I love it so much. But you guys have gone through a lot of trouble redesigning this game. So how has the game evolved?
Yeah, so the biggest design, law that we had was, we wanted to make it, as nimble and fast as a modern role-playing game, right? Because there are so many awesome 90s things about original Torg that a modern play group just probably wouldn't be able to handle. And they just wouldn't. And so we wanted to make that accessible to the new audience, and to do that, you have to streamline. But our main goal was, at the end of that streamlining, it still had to feel like Torg. So there were certain things that were like, oh man, it'd be way easier to do it this way. But when you try it like that, it just doesn't feel like the same game anymore.
Yeah,
so we got back on that. Yeah,
I've got one example.
Okay.
Fairly early on, we tried to. There's one thing that a lot of people are surprised that we kept is the bonus chart. Mm-hmm. And this bonus chart, instead of what most games are, where you roll a die, you add a modifier, you compare it to a number. In Torg, you have to roll a die, look at a chart, come up with a number, and then modify that with a skill or something. And we looked at getting rid of that chart. And we went through a lot of different creative ways to do that, but when it came right down to it, we found that when we did that, it did not feel like Torg. And so that bonus chart, even though it was a little bit weird, it had to stay in, or else the game just felt completely different.
It is. It just loses its personality without it. Yeah,
but
exactly.
But the problem, of course, is that it does make things a little bit more complicated and slow, which means that we had to do other stuff to speed things up and streamline them. So that kind of informed the design path that we took.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I have like a whole book of Torg magic, and it just broke my brain. There was a whole system for spell design and the many rules of how the arcane universe works, and it was very nerdy, and that in a great, cool way, but I just never quite wrapped my head around that.
Well, it is. It's really cool, and it was the same with the gadget inventions for the Nile, and it's like, oh man, this is really fun, interesting stuff, and it's kind of your own, mini game that you play on your own outside of the regular game to build this stuff. But the downside to it is so, for example, like with the spell creation, it could actually be sort of constricting to creativity in some ways, because when you're building spells, you're building them within that system, that framework that's going to work. And it's like, when we were working on some of the Isle stuff, and we're like, oh, we should start with a spell creation system. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't, because if we start there, all the spells are going to feel the same. Right, they're going to be predictable. And magic shouldn't be predictable. Like, we need to kind of break out of that. And I'm not saying we'll never do it, but it's never been a focus, because we want the focus on this one to be what you do at the table, not what you're doing between the sessions.
Yeah, it's just something that I never would have had time for. And I'm sure some gamers do, but I think a lot of us don't. We just, especially God now. I mean, if I want to get back into RPGs, I'm a parent. Maybe I can maybe I could game with my kids, but then not if it's going to take 8 hours in between sessions to come up with a new type of batarang or something for one of the boys.
And I think that's what's been controlling how the hobbies evolved over the last 30 years, right? Yeah. As players skew older, they've got different needs, and there are different games that fill those needs for different age groups. But, and even the younger kids coming in, they've got more stuff to do. Like they don't want to dive into that for 8 to 10 hours. Just
that's a good point. They have the internet; they can get instant gratification anytime.
Right. I think that's the kind of thing that's informed most modern design, as players get older and they've got less time for it, but also the newer players, there are more things that they can spend their attention on, so they don't have as much time for it either. So in older designs, having all these subsystems and preparation and all that was a feature. Like, that was more time that you got for your hard-earned dollars that you spent on that game. Whereas now that's not true. It's kind of the obvious. It's like we want to get there faster and smoother and get out, play and get out.
Maybe you can't actually define this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Has modern technology and convenience, has that helped or hurt the way we play these kinds of games? Because I was thinking back to I think it was called Rollmaster that I played like once.
Yeah, Rollmaster.
And
absolutely.
like a single round of combat would take like a half an hour because you're like rolling a die and then you're cross-referencing on like 8 different charts to find out like what part of a thing that you hit, and like, oh, it's his left leg, and then you check like a different chart for bleeding results or something. Like, just way super complicated. But now things are Dungeons and Dragons. The last time they put out an edition, I think they said that they were modeling some of their concepts around things like EverQuest and World of Warcraft. Like,
that was the story that 4th edition was based on that, and 5th edition got away from that significantly.
Okay.
But what you're talking about with Rollmaster, like, complexity adds immersion, right?
Yes, like, yes, and realism.
When you see, yeah, exactly. Like, and but it's not a goal in itself. The goal is to get the immersion without the extra weight of those rules. And I think, as we talk about technology, not just computer technology and all that, but the tabletop rules that we use for role-playing games, that's a technology in and of itself, and it's evolving too. We're building on the concepts that were created 30 years ago, and those evolve year after year after year, and we get better at it collectively. And it changes.
Another thing to think about too is that the people designing role-playing games back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or sorry, 70s and 80s, so Torg was being designed late 80s, is that those designers and the veteran designers at the time, they had come from war games, and that's what war games are like. And even now, like with Games Workshop and Warhammer 40,000 and stuff, that's the type of game that they have. But now, people who are designing games now, they grew up, especially the ones that are on the leading edge, they've often grown up playing role-playing games instead of war games. And so they've got a different background. And I can't say that I came up with that myself. In fact, actually, I was just listening to another podcast that had Jonathan Tweed explain that. And that just makes perfect sense to me. That a lot of that complexity early on was informed by wargaming, and that's not the way that most people play role-playing games now.
Yeah, well, and it's like I say, it's the technology that you pursue to get your immersion, and that technology changes. And the other thing is there's a lot of different tastes out there, and there's no one that's right or wrong. A lot of people still crave that level of detail. Like, they're missing that in modern games, and there's no wrong answer there. It's like, man, play what you like.
I could see that. Just a board game that we were playing the other day. You guys probably haven't heard of it. It was called Assault on Doomrock, and I got it off a Kickstarter campaign a couple years ago. Babe, you've played things like Talisman. We've played Firefly, which is a pretty complicated game, but Doomrock, you just had your head down on the table, and I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. Wait, here's what happens next in this cool board game. And you just like groan at me. What makes a tabletop game fun for you, a person who did not grow up with this kind of stuff?
Well, it needs to be not necessarily fast, but it needs to keep moving. I hate it when you have to stop and wait for somebody for 5 minutes to decide what they're going to do. I need it to be quick enough to where people can make a quick decision and move on. If it keeps moving, I'm good. But if people are just like, well,
we weren't actually doing role playing in that particular game. Now, a lot of role playing is sort of improv acting in a manner of speaking. Wouldn't you say, guys?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and actually, there's two things with taking a long time, especially in role-playing games. There's taking a long time to figure out what you're going to do, and taking a long time to resolve what you're going to do. And to me, I don't totally mind having, especially in really dramatic situations, players trying to figure out what they're going to do. And there's actually a mechanic in Torg that really emphasizes that plan to do the big, heavy, dramatic hit right at the end of the combat. But
that's true.
But boy, that should be quick to resolve. Once you actually make the decision, then you need to be bang, 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 actually find out what happens. And I think that's what I think we've done pretty well with this. And I have to say, I was personally, when I was going into the design, I was a little worried that it wouldn't be as fast as I would like, because I've kind of grown to like a lot of the narrative games. Like I worked on Firefly, the role-playing game, and I've also loved, some of these more narrative type games that are they're really quick to resolve, generally speaking. But especially the stuff that Darrell came up with and Shane came up with, I'm really, really happy with how fast it is to resolve some of the stuff.
Right, and some of that was the design struggle, right? Because we had, in the guns with the rapid fire and double tapping, we had all these options, and it was bogging people down. And we're like, wow, we need to do something with this so that a gun nut playing will actually feel like, okay, they've captured something here. Like it's not a hand wavy whatever. But at the same token, someone that doesn't care that much, we didn't want them to be stuck, like, here's like 10 options and you're going to have to sift through each and every one before you do. It's like, no. Let's keep that simple, like as simple as we can possibly get away with so that your decision points are meaningful and few.
Nice.
That sounds smart. Mm-hmm. So then, Babe, does that sound... that's probably something that sounds more appealing to you based on our experiences recently board gaming. So when
it sounds like a sales pitch.
That's what this is all about. I don't even whatever. Forget this podcast thing. I'm just trying to get you into gaming. So when you think about something that you've enjoyed, Skyrim, Fallout, the Bethesda RPGs, they're considered role-playing games. What were the things about that RPG feel that hook you in? Like, what gets you excited about those games? It's not just shooting things in the face with a shotgun, right?
It's pretty much that.
Oh.
No.
Well, never mind then. Moving on.
I like the options that you get, because you can choose so many different options and you can make your own path, and if you don't feel like going to do the big game goal, the main storyline, you don't have to. You can go off and just go drink at a tavern or go shoot some dogs in the head or something. You can just do whatever you want.
Not that we glorify shooting dogs in the head here. Well, in Skyrim, it would be a bow and arrow instead of a shotgun.
I don't know. I think I like that you can basically do your own story.
Okay.
Make your own story.
Right. Mm-hmm. And now you don't get, I think people are sometimes frustrated in a game like Skyrim or Fallout where you might be in a conversation and have a couple choices of what to say, but it might not be what you actually want your character to say. Right. That's a little constricting. In a tabletop game, that restriction no longer exists. Really? Yeah. You don't have to just choose from a few different answers. I don't think I've ever been in a situation where the game master hands you a card and says, pick one of these 4 things to say. It's all I'm prepared for. That's what I was expecting.
Let's just say that the end of Mass Effect 3, the original end, would have been significantly different if that was a tabletop RPG. I have not played that, but I've heard bad things about the ending.
All right, nobody better be dissing on Mass Effect 3.
I am not dissing Mass Effect 3. It was a great game until the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
Yes, we won't talk about that anymore, though.
What is the role? How would you guys describe game mastering something like Torg?
So the game master is always in a fun position in that they are part referee, because they're the ones that have to manage, everyone's going to come up with what they want to do, And the rules are going to cover as much as we possibly can. But like you mentioned, we're not handing you an index card with 3 options on it. Like, there's always what someone makes up. And as a referee, it's the GM's job to put that into game mechanics terms and figure out how that's actually going to come about. And then the other big part of, there's like 3 big parts for the GM. One is referee, one is storyteller, right? And we'll have adventures and things like that help to provide that framework. And the Delphi Council, they give them like, okay, here's a place to start. Here's an objective to put in front of them. Here's something to tempt them, your players. But in the end, the players are going to do what they want to do. And as a storyteller, the GM's going to have to respond to that and craft to it. And then the third part of that is not just in the storytelling, it's in the actual playing. Like, players play a character and the GMs play every other character in the world.
Yep. You are the CPU. You are the processor of the computer role-playing game this time, because you have to do everything that the players don't get to do. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that sounds interesting.
And one of our goals, since both Shane and I, when we play, we tend to be the GM. So when we've crafted our rules, we wanted to take as much of that weight off the GM as we possibly can.
I like
to
that.
Leave more room for the GM to have fun, right? To play those characters and to come up with the story, and it's a robust framework, but I think people were shocked when they started seeing videos of me running, and I didn't have a lot of charts in front of me. Like, the only thing that I run with in front of me is, an unused character sheet, so I've got the bonus chart for my villains, and that's it.
Wow.
Now, you can definitely make use of more. I mean, if you've got the GM screen with the tables and the whatever, and there are times where you're like, oh man, I might have to stop and look up this chart or whatever. But in general, we try to keep it light enough to where, I run without a net, so to speak, and it works great. So,
yeah, see, effectively, some of the changes that we made to the rules, and like I said, we still the bonus chart, but we brought in we changed some rules that allowed us to speed things up enough, and part of that is not having to refer to charts. And there's a couple of them. There's instead of having a bunch of success levels, we have 3, and you don't even have to what's called carry the bonus number from original Torg, where you'd roll a die, and that number that came out, you have to remember that for your hitting, you'd have to remember that for your damage, and anything else after that. But now it's just go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, in some ways, that was like the whole point of the bonus chart, right? Because you get your roll and you've generated the bonus from the bonus chart, you're going to use that bonus in a bunch of different things. But, and what we've gone to, like Dean was just about to say, is where instead of keeping that number, all that matters is, did you get the number? Did you get it by 5? Did you get it by 10 or more? And there you have basically different effects, like rolling a bonus die or something, depending on those. But it doesn't matter how much you made it by. And a lot of people at first were like, isn't that actually more complicated? Like, you've actually added steps. But in practice, it's way, 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 way simpler.
Faster, for sure. Yeah.
It is, because you don't have to have that persistent, like what we found when you're like, oh, I made it by 6, so I'm going to add 6 to my damage. And by the time you've done some of the other calculations, you're like, wait, what was my bonus again? And you'd get some cognitive dissonance there, where now it's just like, I got a good success. I'm going to roll a d6 and add that to my damage, and off we go. We're done.
Awesome.
And it helps that rolling the bonus die is just fun.
Yeah, because as Darrell was saying, the bonus die now it's totally new from original Torg.
Yes, I've
and
seen
now
that.
What it is that if you beat it by 5, that's a good result. If you beat it by 10, it's outstanding. So if you're firing a weapon and you get a good result, you roll this d6 and then add the result to your damage, and if you get an outstanding, you roll 2d6. And the special thing here, though, is that a roll of a 6, or if you use the special dice that we're making, if you get the infinity symbol, that counts as a 5, and then it explodes. So if you roll a 6, you get 5, plus you roll again, and if you got another 6, that's now 10, and you roll again, and now let's say you get 3. So that's you add 13 to your damage on your weapon, and that's how you get the big hits that do a lot of the damage.
And that's when the zombie's head explodes, babe.
Right. Well, and what's one of the other, things that took weight off of was in old Torg, you had maximums on weapons. So it's like, it was, strength plus whatever, but you couldn't physically do a certain, beyond a certain level of damage with a weapon, no matter what you rolled, because it got ridiculous really fast. But with this, and like, oh man, I rolled up 100 plus, so that my 22 rifle just did like 100 damage. No. But in this one, because it tops out at 2 dice, we don't have to do that, right? You're like, well, it's a 22 plus 1d6 or a 22 plus 2d6, and if you roll great on those, fantastic, you got that crazy lucky shot, whatever. But we don't have to worry about a skilled person consistently rolling 100 damage with the weapon. So we can kind of offload that whole system and say, we don't care anymore. Have fun, 100 damage. Yeah.
Another problem that solves is the glass-jawed ninja.
The glass-jawed ninja, yeah.
It's funny how that term somehow travels the world, because I think we would either say ninja or maybe elf, but the idea was always the same, the glass-jawed something. It was just something kind of broken in the original Torg system, right?
Yeah, and the way it worked was that in order to hit somebody who was really hard to hit, that meant you had to roll a really high bonus number, which then went over onto the damage. Which meant that did a lot of damage, and usually those fast, nimble guys didn't have a very good toughness. So usually what ended up happening is that you either completely missed or you killed the ninja.
Yeah, right. And if you need a plus 20 bonus to even get the guy, it's like, well, I'm doing 20 some odd damage no matter what. You're going to die, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was some degree whether or not that was actually a problem or a feature or a bug. But enough people thought it was a problem that we figured that we should at least try to address it, and this bonus die does.
I think just one last thing I think about of being sort of Torg defining, and we haven't talked about it yet. I was thinking about how you cited John McClane earlier. You cited that lucky shot with the 22 revolver or whatever. This game has always had a very cinematic feel, I think, was designed to almost feel like you're in a movie, right? And the story revolves around these different realities that invaded Earth to try to drain them of a certain type of energy, this possibility energy. So the possibility is something that you don't see or maybe even couldn't execute properly or easily in an action video game like a Skyrim, but it gives you a level of control over those dramatic situations. You can boost your character up by drawing upon this special energy / mechanic that you get rewarded with as you play. Has that changed at all?
No, and it's changed a little bit in that we don't tie them to XPs anymore, where they're just an economy that you spend to do awesome stuff in the game session.
Awesome points.
Because we do want people to do awesome stuff in the game session. And then the other conceit that triggers into, you mentioned Core Earth kind of felt cinematic, and we've ramped that up significantly in the new one, because we say the baseline is the world out your window, but it's really not. It's actually the world of 80s action movies. Magic does kind of work in Core Earth, right? Miracles do kind of work there. There are Sasquatches hiding out in the forest, and chupacabras draining goats in the Southwest. That's part of Core Earth without any invasion at all. And that's how we've made the Core Earth heroes a little bit more interesting. That's the power set that they bring is you actually are John McClane, right? You are that guy. And Old Torg kind of flirted with that, and we've embraced it full on.
And one of the big changes from the way that we did original Torg is that we made sure that every Cosm had a thing that they did that was cool. And Earth was always a problem before because, I mean, yeah, they got some technology, but it wasn't the best technology, right. And they didn't really get cool stuff. So in Torg Eternity, core Earthers are the ones who can really manipulate reality well. So some of these rules that were as part of the core rules in the original Torg, like invoking reality storms on other beings from other realities, that's not a general case anymore. It's only core Earthers who are able to do that, and only if they get the big new mechanic that we've got called perks, and only if they get a perk that can allow them to do that. And these perks are what allows you to be specialized in a whole bunch of things, and it actually takes care of a lot of the skills that had flourished in the original Torg. So, you know, you might have had an honor or a corruption skill from Isle at some point, but now that's a perk. It's a special way that you use more general skills.
Right. And the particularly cool thing about that is it lets us keep all the cool stuff from old Torg, but we don't inundate people with it, right? It only comes up if you bought it. So like negation was something that old Storm Knights used to be able to do. You could spend your possibilities to cancel out possibilities spent by bad guys. Now that's a core Earth perk. So if you're like, okay, I'm a core Earth guy, and I've got, you know, my feet on the ground, and, you know, I could just say no to the invaders. And so, yeah, the invader's like, oh, I'm going to, you know, spend my possibility because I didn't like that roll. And you're the core Earth guy says, no, invader, no. This is our reality. That's not happening. You know, I don't believe that. And you just shut them down. It's great, you know. But it's not something that people in general have to deal with. It's a rule for you that you buy into, and all the perks are like that. They're like, anytime we do exceptions, they're done in perks. And that also lets the sort of the grammar of the rules be much lighter. Like, they only have to do the general stuff, not the exceptions. All the exceptions are handled by perks on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and all the perks, all the really cool stuff are perks now. So spells are perks, miracles are perks, psionics are perks, powers are perks, martial arts are perks, your light and darkness abilities are perks, and cybernetics perks. So, you know, all of this cool, weird stuff is almost self-contained little rules modules that you don't have to worry about for everybody. And you're not going to be walking around with 20 perks. So, you know, you're not necessarily going to have that core Earth player who does take negation. He might take some other stuff, like maybe he wants to be really good sniper or something like that. And so that means that in a lot of games, those villains are going to be able to use their possibilities. So they are going to be able to do some pretty nasty stuff on occasion too. Because before, you know, the purpose of villain possibilities seemed to be just to drain possibilities from the players.
Yeah, it really did. That's funny. Okay. Oh man, I'm excited for this game to come out.
I'm really excited. I'm going to play. Yes.
All right. And for other people want to play this too, especially after listening to this. So let's talk about that to wrap this all up. Let's talk about this Kickstarter campaign, shall we, guys?
I want to know how long this one game will take. What is the expected time to play a full game? 5-6
years? What do you say, guys?
So an individual game session usually averages around 4 hours. Is what we usually play. Could be shorter, could be longer. A lot of that's in the hands of the game master. So Torg is built around an act and scene structure because it is so cinematic, and we aim for around 4 or 5 hours for acts, and we want the acts to be about a session. But people go sideways and embellish, so an act might take several game sessions to play out. That's all kind of wildly variable, but the intent is 4 to 5 hour sessions and one session an act.
But you keep your characters from session to session, so it becomes a campaign that could go on for a long time, potentially.
Yes. The Possibility Wars tell the story writ large about these invasions happening on core Earth. And we'll just say the core book takes place 3 months into that invasion, and the first source books are 1 year in, and there are more years to come. So it's a big story that people will get to tell together.
Love it.
I think that one, just a sidebar on with players going sideways, that we should mention, because it's another
Cosm
big
cards.
Cosm cards. Cosm cards are in the original drama deck, and we didn't really get into the drama deck, but it's really cool, and it's almost the same as it was in original Torg. But one of the things we did do was take a lot of those Cosm specific cards and make it its own category. So each act, every player gets one Cosm card that's based on the Cosm that they're in. And a lot of the world laws of these Cosms and sort of the genre and the mechanics that support that genre are in these Cosm cards. But generally speaking, what happens is the player gets to choose when and if they play those cards. And they almost always have a benefit, which is you get more possibilities. A lot of them do that. But there's always a cost for doing that. Like, say, having your party get attacked by a roaming Tyrannosaurus Rex. Go ahead.
I was just saying, what's cool about that is that, again, takes more pressure off the GM, because it's kind of weird when you're the GM to be like, I just feel like eating somebody with a Tyrannosaur today. That's just going to happen, because that's what happens when dinosaurs take over. And you kind of feel bad doing that. And then, or there's a big random encounter chart, and that's more work, and you got to roll dice or whatever. Whereas with the Cosm card, it's player choice. They'd be like, we're running low on possibilities. We're going to want some power here. I'm going to play this dinosaur attack. Something's going to happen. And now it shares that narrative power between the GM and the players in very interesting ways, and it reinforces the feel of these different alternate worlds without needing more layers of rules on top. You don't need... roll a d6 every day, and if a 5 comes up, then a dinosaur attacks. It's no, we don't care. Just everyone's got this card, and when it triggers, boom, something happens.
Right. Okay. That sounds fun. I like dinosaur attacks. All right, so the Kickstarter. Let's talk about that then.
How do we get this game?
Oh, did we lose Darrell?
Uh-oh. No, I was going to let you take that one.
Oh, okay. Well, search for Torg Eternity on Kickstarter, and that's where the Kickstarter is. And it's got six more days to go. Right. And the best deal right now is the Delphi Council cargo box. And the reason it's the best deal is that it's probably got, somewhere around $250 worth of product in it, and it only costs $200.
It's more than that now. I think we're up in the 300 because we unlocked the Delphi missions and some other books going in there. So,
but we still got at least two more products that we should hit before the end of the Kickstarter that will also go into that box.
I certainly hope so.
For free. And so the more of these stretch goals we unlock, every physical stretch goal, except for the miniatures that were unlocked, which look amazing, in my opinion.
Yes, they do.
Will go into that Delphi Council box, and that'll just basically give you everything to start playing the game once it's all printed and sent out, which should be sometime in October. But for anybody who backs the Kickstarter, even at the PDF level, which is only $30, you will get the core book and drama deck PDFs very shortly after the close of the Kickstarter. So you could be theoretically playing Torg Eternity in 2 to 3 weeks.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest thing with that is it's going to be however long it takes us to get backer kits out to people.
Yes.
The PDFs will be ready by the time that happens. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a great idea.
If people are looking for more information, if you do Google search for Torg Eternity, you'll find our webpage pretty easily. And we did about 16 previews for the new rules and the new realities and
right.
changes and stuff like that. And so if you've got detailed questions, there's also our forums, and I'm on there frequently answering questions.
A lot of the previews you guys posted on the website also had some pretty fun art, and I think a lot of that art is going to be on the cards that come with the game. Is that right?
The art looks amazing.
Oh, yeah. The art is so beautiful. That's one of those things that came out better than we could have possibly imagined. Like, you write up the art orders for some of these things, you're like, oh, this could be cool, and then you get it back, and you're like, wow, that's so much cooler than what I was describing. Well done, artists. Yeah.
I mean, we haven't really shown this because it's going to be going into the Living Land Cosm book, but early on we got a picture of the 5 different plantings of Gospog, and it just looks amazing.
The Gospog,
some of those Gospog will freak the crap out of you. And basically, Gospog, for anybody who doesn't know, they're basically plant zombies that get progressively more powerful and change into different forms based on the reality they're in. As you plant more seeds in graveyards. But yeah, they look incredible. All the art really does look amazing.
Oh, I think this will make for a great final question, and then we'll let you guys go, and I'll get this online. We have the many different realities that are part of this game. That's what I love about it, this multi-genre feel that you can do almost anything. You can be almost anything character-wise, and you can do almost anything or go almost anywhere that you can imagine. So what are your favorites? What are your favorite places to adventure in this game?
You want me to start there, Darrell?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so I had 3 favorites from original Torg, and that was Nile Empire.
And the Nile Empire is sort of modern. No, sorry, 1920s like Egypt style with some superpowers, like a Pulp Fiction kind of feel.
Yeah, basically, imagine The Mummy, the good one from 1999. Plus Pulp Heroes, and that's pretty much what Nile Empire is.
Like The Shadow, not quite, not Superman level kind of heroes, but more gritty.
Yeah, Captain America probably be the most powerful of those types of heroes.
Yeah. So you love the Nile.
There's Cyber Papacy, which is Spanish Inquisition plus cyberpunk.
Yep. And
then there's Aurorsch, which is basically your gothic horror. Colonialism thing, and the big difference with that now is that instead of invading Indonesia in the original setting, it's invading India in this one.
Okay.
But to be honest, based on what we've done, I would have to put the Living Land as really up there with the Nile Empire as far as my favorite. Ross Watson wrote that book, and he knocked it out of the park.
And the Living Land is prehistoric. It's like Jurassic Park with miracle casting lizard men, pretty much, or Land of the Lost. Yeah, like a little bit like Sleestacks, but maybe a little more intimidating.
Right, and the reason I really love that is that we took a little element from another setting called The Land Below, called The Law of Wonders, and we tweaked it.
Okay.
And so what ends up happening is that little sub-pockets of realities that have been conquered by the High Lords, and not necessarily even the Living Land, but any High Lord that has ever defeated a civilization or cosm, that little pocket could pop up at any time with treasure and eternity shards and stuff like that. And these appear, stick around for a little bit, and then disappear. And so there's actually a reason for the Delphi Council to send Storm Knights into the Living Land to go get stuff, as opposed to
that's cool.
Just rescuing. And that just opens up a element of because you can put any pocket cosm that you want and into one of those and just have a little sub adventure. And so it really can allow the GM to really crank up his creativity. But yeah, so I put the Nile Empire and the Living Land being my favorites now.
All right.
And that was a big goal of ours when we were re-looking at the settings, was we wanted to make sure that there was a reason to actively go to each one. They weren't just places you wanted to get away from. There was a reason to go there.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, Aurorsch, I think you always want to get away from there because you will die if you stay too long.
Well, it's not as deadly as it was in original Torg.
Oh,
It's still
It's
not a
pretty
nice
deadly.
place.
All right.
It's still deadly, but it's not. It's not the cosm you go to die. Basically,
Yeah, that's what it used to be. All right,
no
well, that's
longer
good.
like
It's
that.
probably better from a balance perspective. All right, so the other favorites?
So if I got to pick one, I'd pick the Cyber Papacy, because that one, it was the weirdest one when Torg first came out, because you're like, what? It's like cyberpunk, but there's like a 18th century church, and I don't what. Now, just the way the world has changed in the last 20 years, all of the themes from that are just so crystal clear now. Like we're practically living in the Cyber Papacy now.
Yeah, when Torg launched, the internet almost existed or was just sort of starting up, and now we know so much more about what computers and networks can be capable of.
Exactly.
I think Cyberpunk was only 4 years old when Torg came out.
Yep. Yeah, it was very new, and so a lot of those concepts you didn't have as much to hold on to, and and the whole idea of like, oh, if you go into the Godnet, delving for whatever, all this stuff can happen to you, but you're like, I'm playing a cowboy from Terra. I'm never going to go into the Godnet. Why would I ever do that? But the cool thing that we can do now, because augmented reality and some of the other things that happen in our own world, it's like, wow, just a little bit more technology. The internet comes out to meet you. Right?
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
there on the street. And that makes more sense to us now. And there's all these little fun gags that we can do, like achievement scores and things like that makes sense to us now that were maybe, floating in the ether before. And I'll give an honorable mention to two other cosms. I love what we did with Pan Pacifica, what's happening in Asia. And what's great is we can't really talk that much about it because it's a secret. Like, it's all intrigue and no one knows what the heck's going on there.
Okay.
And that makes it really interesting. And all I can say is there's stuff coming there that is going to blow people away. And I have a very soft spot for the new Tharkold, which...
Okay. So Pan Pacifica, we would see it's sort of based around like revenge. There's a lot of martial arts, big business, right?
Yes, those are themes that are included.
And then
with the main
Tharkold.
one being intrigue, yeah. So Tharkold was from original Torg, but it wasn't one of the initial invasions. Their invasion failed in original Torg, and then they showed up in a city book. And they are technologically advanced demons. There's basically Hellraiser meets Terminator, and they've
Plus Mad Max.
Plus Mad Max. Well, that's what we added to it, right? But yeah, they've been ruling their own little post-apocalyptic cosm for 1,000 years, and they've joined this invasion. And individually, techno-demons are extremely powerful and extremely scary. But as an organization, just everything that could go wrong for these guys goes wrong. So and they've landed in Russia, and it's just been a hot mess from day one. And that's why I love that one so much, because it's just chaos.
Well, there's a long-standing real-world history that invading Russia is never a great idea.
We definitely play with that. Yeah, there are precedents involved.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see that. Okay. Babe, what's your favorite?
Favorite what?
I don't.
Just a quick thing with Pan Pacifica, because some people might not be. That might sound a little weird for some people. Pan Pacifica is the original Nippon tech,
right?
But we've expanded. It's not just Japanese taking over, property and stuff like that, which is very much a relic of its time. Plus, China has basically become a world power since Torg first came out.
Oh yeah, that's
so
true.
we wanted definitely to include them as part of this whole. But the other thing that we added, it's Pan Pacific effectively is corporate espionage plus ninjas plus Resident Evil.
Oh, that is new. Okay, that's exciting. Zombie dogs for you to shoot with a shotgun, babe.
Yay.
You wish they were just dogs.
I'm so much more excited now. That's awesome. Okay, so I just have to. I've already backed this campaign, so I just have to wait a few weeks to start getting my hands on the source material.
Yep,
Pretty much.
As soon as backer kits go out, there should be links to PDFs with it.
Awesome. Yep. Okay. And anyone listening to this that has had fun listening along with us, you should get over to Kickstarter. We'll put a link in the show notes, but as you guys said before, it's Kickstarter.com. Just go there, search for Torg. That's Torg Eternity, which will also be the name of this episode. But go search for that and just give it a look. And if it seems like something fun, well, guess what? You're right. It is. And Babe, You're going to try it.
I am. I'm excited. I really am excited.
Okay. Well, guys, any last words?
No, I'm just really looking forward to seeing this hit people's hands and
me too.
To hear all the comments and stuff that they say about what we did with it.
Yep. And I just want to say thanks for having us on, and the possibility wars are just beginning.
Ooh, I like it. Thanks for joining us, guys. You've been very generous with your time. And good luck with the rest of this campaign and everything that Torg is going to be offering in the future. I will definitely be along for the ride.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Me too.